or you might be asked to create a new role from scratch, which I'll show you in the BIP report module. That doesn't nothing in that. So you have to go through the same steps. You have to click on create role, fill in the details, and add in the privileges, give the data grants, assign duty roles, assign them to users, and that's it. That's all you need to do. And if you, in some cases, but it doesn't happen too frequently, but sometimes a client might ask you to verify the user access issue. So you might get an issue like this. You have two users, user 1 and user 2. So user 1 says that, user 2 says that he cannot access a particular screen. And he also gives you a clue saying that user 1 is able to access that, but I'm not able to access that particular screen or perform a particular action. Okay. So there is a specific functionality or a screen that user 2 is not able to access, whereas user 1 is able to access. How do you debug that? You have to look at the roles assigned to user 1 and user 2. And when user 2 says that user 1 is able to access it, usually these will be the users from the same department or from a same business unit. And they will have, or they are more likely to have the same roles as well. But there could be one or two odd roles which might change. Say, for example, accounts, say user 1 has, say, accounts payable, a manager role. Okay. And the user 2 has, user 1 has accounts payable manager role. So you are trying to debug an issue wherein user 2 is able to access something, user 2 is not able to access, and whereas user 1 is able to access a specific functionality. A specific screen or functionality. Okay. So in such case, how do you debug it? You take a look at the roles assigned to user 1 and user 2. For user 1, let's say you have accounts payable manager role assigned. And so for user 1 and user 2, all the roles are same. There is only one difference in there is only one difference in terms of roles. User 1 has accounts payable manager role and user 2 has accounts payable invoice supervisor role assigned. So this gives you a clue that yes, all the other privileges are same between user 1 and user 2, and there's only one role difference. For user 1, there is a payables manager assigned. For user 2, there is a payables invoice supervisor assigned. So this role difference might be behind this access issue. So user 2 is able to access something, user 2 is not able to access something, whereas user 1 is able to. So that means there might be some additional privileges in the accounts payable manager role, which is letting user 1 access a specific screen or a functionality, which is missing in accounts payable invoice supervisor role. But how do you do it? How do you debug this? So if you follow the approach that I have told you, so if you try to query the role, query this role, you will have hundreds of duty roles in there, and each duty role will have again many privileges there, right? So you should be. There is a to debug issues like this. Oracle has given a compare functionality. You have an out-of-the-box option available to compare the roles. So you can search for the first role. Say, for example, in this case, I want to compare this role with this role, a payables manager role with payables invoice supervisor role, so that I can understand what exactly is the difference between these two. Okay, so that I can understand what privilege might be behind this access issue. So you search for accounts payable manager role. Search for accounts payable manager role, click on the drop down, and you click on this compare roles option. And you can select the second role. And here, now you can select the payables invoice supervisor role. Click OK. And you can put in a filter criteria that you want. Okay, so you can, if you say all, you will see all the differences between these two. Or if you want to see only something that is there in the first role but missing in the second role, so if you select this option, it will show you what are those additional privileges that are present in first role which are missing in second role. And if you want to see something that is there only in the second role but not in the first role, and in both the roles, you've got a few options that you can select here. And in terms of filter criteria, you can also select, you can also restrict the differences to only the privileges, additional privileges, or the duty roles, or the data grants. So you've got, in short, you've got a complex framework given by Oracle here, which you can use to easily figure out easily figure out the access issues by comparing the roles using all these options. So if you just say all, and if you say only in the first role, and if you click on compare, that will give you all the privileges which are present only in the first role but not in the second role. So you see these options, you see these functionalities, you see these the privileges which are present. These privileges are present only in the accounts payable manager role, but they are not assigned to accounts payable invoice supervisor role. So if client says that I'm not able to assign business function to the user, if user 2 says that I'm not able to assign business unit or assign business function to a business unit, then what do you do? To this, you would create a custom invoice supervisor role, and to that custom invoice supervisor role, you will assign this privilege, because this privilege is there in payables manager role, because of which user 1 is able to access it, but user 2 is not able to access it because the supervisor role doesn't have this privilege. So in that case, you don't go to the supervisor role, directly edit it and add this privilege. You don't do that. Instead, you make a copy of this and you add in this privilege so that a supervisor also will have access to the privilege that is missing. Okay, that's how you debug the access issues. It doesn't come to you quite often. Again, it depends on who is performing the security setups. In some projects, a functional consultants does it, and in some projects, technical consultants does it. So there's no fixed rule or thumb rule that security will be done by functional or a technical consultant. It keeps switching between technical and functional in different projects. Okay, so that's all about roles, guys. And if we go back to users, we have seen the options available in users yesterday. If you go to analytics, you get to see the roles. So when you create a role, there is a category that you pick up, right? So you select whether you're creating a job role or a duty role, right? And again, when it comes to job roles, you will have, when it comes to roles, you will have them by application. You've got financials job roles, you've got a CRM job role, you've got HCM job role, BA job role, right? So for each and every application, again, you have job roles, duty roles, abstract roles, and privileges. So you get those, you have the count here. You have the count of roles by category here, and you have them displayed in a graphical format here. We don't use this quite often, but again, if someone is interested in analytics, you can have a look at it here. Security, the certificate section. This is important. You need to know a bit of background for this to understand this. So we'll come to this in a moment. We'll cover the other aspects and then we'll come back to the certificate section. Okay, because I need to give you some background to explain why do we need certificates, what is PGP encryption and all that stuff. Let's cover the other aspects that we have. User category. Where did you see this? Yesterday when we created a user, so if you try to create a user now, add user. And when you create a user, there will be an user category that will be selected. So you need to first select a user category, and this user category drives few things as far as the user creation is concerned, and few bits after that as well. So there's only one user category at the moment, a default user category. And if you go to user category, and when we typed in, say, a Fusion user 1 yesterday, when we tabbed out, okay, so you could see that there is a username that got auto-generated, right? Fusion.user1. Let me create it one more time. if I say first name dot last name, okay, so you could see that the username is auto-generated and there is a specific pattern to it. And what is the pattern that you see in there? That is a first name dot a dot last name. So this is coming from, so there is a username generation rule that you assign to the category, and that username generation rule drives how your username should be generated. So if you go to user category, let's cancel the user creation. And not just the username creation, there are quite a few things that user category controls. So if you click on it, edit it. So you look at the username generation rule. So what do you see in there? You see first name dot last name. Because of this, whatever you type in the first name and whatever you type in the last name, those two are getting concatenated and the username is getting generated. And you've got other options as well. Some clients stick to first name dot last name, but some clients change it to email. They would like employees to use their own email as a username to sign in. Some clients might use the employee number as well as a login as a username. And some clients might use a first letter in their first name followed by a last name. So this username generation rule determines how username needs to be generated when a user is created. So it gets driven from the user category. And you've got another option called generate system username when generation rule fails. So if for some reason, if this rule fails, do you want a user creation to go ahead and a system username to be assigned? If you take this as, if you take this, a system user, system will generate a unique name, username, if this rule fails. So we don't usually change a few things here. Well, we don't usually play around with these options, but it's good if you understand how this works. So you have a password policy that is tagged again to the user category. So when your user is created, it would have been done with the user category, right? And that determines when your password will expire, when to send out a warning, how to reset it, and how complex your password should be, and should you be allowed to use a previously the last password or not when you are resetting it. So if this is checked, say for example, if this is checked and if you use say welcome123 as a password first time, and after 3 months your password would have expired and you had to reset it, right? If this is checked, you won't be able to use the same password. Okay, so this privilege will give administrator to manually reset the password, and this will usually be ticked because in some cases when user gets logged out, he will reach out to admin and they will reset the password. And whenever user is created, notifications will be sent out, not just a user created, but for some actions that you perform in the application, there will be an email notifications that will be sent out. So when you click on say from the login screen or from the initial login screen, if you click on forgot username, an email will be sent out. Or when a new account is created, another email will be sent out. Say for example, when you create a new user, the email that you use in the user creation, they will receive a notification saying Oracle Fusion Applications welcome email, and there will be a link that they can use to reset the password. So it says here first name and last name. Your account has been created. Please follow this link to reset the password. So you've got the templates also available here, okay, which will take effect when you perform those actions. And you will be able to see all the list of users which are created with this default user category. Okay. Any questions so far, guys? Any questions in what we discussed so far?
Prasad, some A got appended over there, yes, right? It is a bug or what? Because I didn't see the category here.
Correct. Even I was surprised to see it because when we created the user in the same instance, yesterday also we used the same instance and we created Fusion user 1, right?
Because it's a duplicate, it's adding yesterday.
And now it is coming fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. So since that user already exists, I think it is prefixing A in between. So since that user already exists, Fusion.user1, they are being proactive here. So since Fusion.user1 already exists in the application, it is in the middle it is adding a. So if you say fusion.user2, you wouldn't see that.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions, guys? Any other questions?
Hi, Prasad.
Okay.
This is Viru. One quick question could be from yesterday session. So in the start of the security, right, you said the users are getting created automatically when the HR gets created an employee, right?
Correct. Yes.
So how does the user defaults, right? Because users are defaulted with the roles, right? When we create the users here, we give the roles, right?
No, the way it works is when you add in when you create employees, you can a user gets created there, and you assign roles using the security matrix using. So you're talking about assigning the roles to the users, is it?
No, I'm talking.
How does the roles get?
Okay, so sorry. So let me have my question in detail. So now we created the users manually here, users, right? But in real time, HR drives when the HR, in the HR system, an employee gets created. So with that employee, the user profile is automatically created. That's what you told on yesterday, right?
Correct. Yes.
So what is the default roles that can be assigned to the users? Then how does that role will drive?
Yeah, you can control it. You can when you create some of the roles, when you create a role, you can define it as auto provisioned role. And what that means is whichever employee is created or whenever a user gets created, that particular role gets automatically provisioned. We usually set up employee as an auto provision rule, right? Okay. So whenever you create a user gets created and employee role gets assigned. So those things you can control from employee creation standpoint. So you can control user gets created for sure. And if there are certain roles that you want to assign to each and every user by default, you can do that as well.
Okay. So the roles which are having default will automatically assign to the user when he gets
users
in HR.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. And apart from the option that we have seen here, yes, please go on.
Yeah, hi Prasad, Pragati here. So can I ask something from yesterday's session? Like I did some lab work.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I was trying to create a user and assign some roles. And when I come to attach the data roles, and I tried the manage data access. So yesterday, as you showed, there is an Excel sheet which we download and we access the BU,
Correct.
attach the BU or something, right? So when I download the Excel,
Correct.
I don't see anything.
Okay. Yeah, even we face the same issue in the session, right? So you would have downloaded it without searching for a user. So that's why a blank sheet would have been downloaded. So you search for the user and then you...
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that too. I kept.
And even then the roles didn't get downloaded in the sheet. That you still got a blank sheet.
Yeah.
What user did you create? Let's go back to setup and maintain. Let's try to do it from here. You've kept it very crisp. Setup and maintenance. And here we go to manage data access.
Mm-hmm.
Manage data access for users.
It should be P. No. P as in Pragati dot B. Yeah.
Okay. So click on the search and then the roles get defaulted. And now you click on authorize data access. prompt you to connect to the instance.
Okay. I didn't get this. So might be that's the reason.
No, you're talking about this pop-up, is it?
Yeah, might be the pop-up or blocked or something. Yeah.
No. To get this pop-up, there is a software that you need to install. I thought you're talking about the content within the Excel sheet. So for you to get this pop-up will come up only if you have a software called ADF DI plugin installed. So there is an ADF DI plugin required, and this plugin, it's called ADF Desktop Integrator plugin. You can download this software directly from our Rainbow Training Institute instance. So you don't have option to download it from ZVCZ instance, but you can download it from our Training Institute instance. You will get that access by today. And what you can do is you need to, at the beginning of the session, I've shown you how to download it, but let me show it one more time. If you go into Navigator, under Tools, you will have an option to download the software. Go to Navigator. And under Tools, you have this option called Download Desktop Integration Installer. Download this, executable file gets downloaded, double click on it and install it. Simple installation. And once you're done with it, you will see this pop up as and when you open the spreadsheet.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. Thank you.
And you can also add roles without using a spreadsheet as well.
Mm-hmm.
One minute, guys. So you don't need to go through the spreadsheet data loader option. I've shown this because it is typically used to do the bulk upload, bulk data access to the users. But what you can also do is you can add in the roles, give the data access from here directly. Okay, so you can select P.B and you can select the role. So you have general accountant role, right? You have let's select the general accountant role. And the security context, select it as a data access set and select the ledger. So this option is always available. So you can add in those roles and you can also quickly duplicate it if you want to give access to multiple ledgers. If you click on this, it will duplicate the entire selection that you have done. And you can select UK primary ledger. And you can add in the privileges like this from UI. But what is the downside with adding it from UI? If you have to give access to 10 different roles for 10 different business units, it doesn't make sense to repeat it manually so many times, right? So that's when this spreadsheet data loader option helps. Okay, but if you look at the user now, you can,
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please go on. Someone else was asking a different question earlier. Okay, I'll take it as no then. And let's go back to the security console.
Sorry, Prasad, just a quick question. How do you navigate back from security, user profile? Yeah, you are here. Okay.
Yeah. You click on home icon, it will take you back to home page. Yeah, click on home button. It will take you back into home page.
Oh, you don't have, back arrows.
You can use the back arrows as well. They do work, but it's not recommended, to be precise.
Yeah, I tried to go back to the prior screen from users, but I end up I couldn't able to find that. When I user, right? So when I go to the user, I created the user from this window. When I wanted to go back prior to this window.
Okay, you are not. So these navigation, usually to navigate within the application, you will have to use the options within the applications. These back buttons do work sometimes, but very often you run into weird issues. Okay.
Because home button will takes you directly to the home page, right? Not the previous page where I come from, right?
No, if you want to go back to the previous page, one option you have is, you can, if it works, it works. The back button, it works. In some cases, it doesn't work. We'll not be able to do much about it. But one option that will help you with is, you click on the favorites button. There will be something called as recent items. So if you click on it, you will be able to see the screens that you visited earlier, and you can switch back to that screen easily. So this option helps you. It saves quite a bit of time, especially when you're doing something, and when you're in the middle of it, you realize that you have to do some setup which was missed out. So you quickly come out of that screen, go back and perform the setups, and you can use this option to get back to what you're working on earlier.
Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Because when we go to the multiple, navigations and click search and do something, and then perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And in some cases, some of the clients do want to enable single sign-on, or they do enable single sign-on. And yes, when a single sign-on needs to be enabled, it won't be you and me doing this job as a technical consultant. There will be IDCS consultant. Okay. IDCS consultant will be setting up the security, and his job would be, so what does IDCS stands for? Identity Domain Cloud Service. And this IDCS consultant will be working with client to have the single sign-on configuration done. Okay, so it also takes a bit of time, at least a few weeks, if not more. And they will work out with the client, and they will set up the single sign-on options. We don't do anything in this particular screen. API authentication. Again, I haven't done anything in this screen as well. I'm not particularly sure on this as well. API authentication, I haven't used this. And if you go to administration, there will be a few options that you have here that you have here. Like in the administration, if you generate some certificates, we're going to talk about what certificates you can generate. There is a PGP encryption certificate that you can generate, which is one of the things that you usually do. You can mention the number of validity days or number of days for which the secure certificates will be valid for. So it's mentioned as 999 here. So that means if you generate a certificate, it will remain valid for close to 3 years, okay, or for 999 days. And you have this synchronization preferences. So what this will do is, so it is set up as 24 hours. Earlier, in the previous releases, we don't have this problem in most of the cases in the current release. But in the previous releases, whenever you change something in the security, like whenever you create a new role and assign it to the users, or whenever you take out something from a user, we had to run a synchronization job explicitly every time. Even if you make a single change in a security, even a small change, we had to run this synchronization job explicitly earlier. But in the newer releases, it started happening from a 20A version. So we don't have to run this synchronization job explicitly until you notice that something is not getting synced. Until you see some discrepancy, you don't need to run this explicitly. And if you don't run this job for more than 24 hours, when you come into this particular screen, security console screen, you see a warning message saying that boss synchronization job has not been run for more than 24 hours now. So this setting will deliver that warning message when you come into the security console screen if the sync job was not run for 24 hours. Where do you run this job from? To run this job, you can go to setup and maintenance. So you can go to setup and maintenance, and from the setup and maintenance screen, you have this option. So you see this run users and role synchronization process. In every offering you select, you will have initial user section, and in the initial user section, you will have a task called run user and role synchronization process. And when you click on it, a job gets triggered. A job called retrieve latest LDAP changes job gets triggered, and this is what the sync job means. And what does it do? It synchronizes users, roles, and other privileges that you have done in the security. It basically updates changes that you have done. We don't need to run this explicitly. In the background, the changes are getting synced, because if you remember, when we created fusion.user1 user yesterday, we made quite a few changes to that user profile, but we haven't run this job even a single time. So there is, in the newer releases, there is no need to explicitly run this job, but in case something is not working, if you see some discrepancy, feel free to go ahead and kick off this job. Okay. Go back to administration. And that is what this preferences mean. So if that sync job was not run for more than 24 hours, you will get a warning message. And apart from that, you see roles in here. And in the roles, you will see preferences here. So you see this, what do you usually set up in preferences is, whenever a seeded role is copied, do you want something to be added as a prefix or a suffix? Okay, so when a role is copied, do you want to add something as a prefix to the name and a code, or do you want to add something as a suffix? And what do you see in here? There is a suffix called GSC and underscore GSC as a suffix. And if you look at, if I take you back to the screenshot that we have taken earlier, when we try to create a copy of the seeded role, GSC got added to the role name, underscore GSC got added to the role code, right? So these suffixes, so whatever is getting suffixed here, so that is coming from here, that is coming from this setup. So instead of this, if your client user has, or say if your client follows a specific naming convention, so whatever custom roles are created, they should be created with say some ABC, or say customer name. Okay. So you see, say for example, if it's BT, it has to start with BT space, right? And you can say BT underscore for as a prefix. So you can change it from suffix to prefix, or you can leave it as a suffix and you can change it to the name that the client wants you to give to the copy roles that are being copied. So whatever you enter here, it will not be freezed. It will just be copied over to the copy screen, and you're free to edit them. We have changed them as well. If you remember, we deleted this GSC and we added our batch identifier as a prefix there. Okay, so you can do that as well. So I'll put it back, because this is a public cloud instance. I don't want to disturb things there. And you've got a graph node limit here. So what this means is, if you go into the role section, if you search for a specific role, say accounts payable invoice supervisor role. When you search for a role definition, it is displaying the results in a tabular format. It is displaying the results in a tabular format. And you've got another option called graphical format. You can also view the roles assigned in a graphical format if you want. Okay, so if you click on show graph, it will show you the information in a graphical format, and if you put your mouse on top of it, it will show you what are the roles that are being assigned. And there is a node limit that is being put as 300 in the administration. So if there are more than 300 rows, if there are more than 300 privileges or duty roles assigned, only 300 will be displayed here. Okay. And there is one more option which controls the the output to be displayed in a tabular format as and when you search for a role. So if you go into administration, there are two parameters there. There are two options. Graph node limit, yes, you can set up, and you can enable a default table view. If you tick this box, whenever you search for a role definition, it will give you the privileges or the duty roles will be shown in a tabular format by default. And if you go to role copy status, you will be able to see the details in that. You could see that the role that we have copied has been complete now. So you can see the roles that are copied out and what was the status of it. And if clients want to use their Active Directory as an authentication options here for ERP Cloud, they can do it as well. Again, this is something that IDCS consultants will work on. So this option, Bridge for Active Directory, will help IDCS consultants to configure Active Directory as an authentication mechanism for logging into Oracle ERP Cloud. Let's go back to certificates. To be precise, what exactly we will be using in this particular screen we might create users in one odd case. You might be creating roles or looking at the role definitions in there, and you might probably be generating certificates here. Other options, yes, it's good if you know what is in there, what options you have in there, but you don't typically use them much. And when it comes to certificates, you have an option to import certificate and generate one. So when you click on generate, you've got two types of certificates that you can generate, X509 and a PGP certificates. So PGP is something that we use quite frequently. So what is this PGP? There's a bit of a background that you need to know. PGP, it stands for Pretty Good Privacy. Okay, so it's nothing but an encryption methodology. Okay, so since we are talking about instance in the cloud, whenever you have to load something into a cloud instance, you will have to upload them to content server, right? So every cloud instance will have a content server attached, and you need to upload file to that content server to be to load it into cloud application. And since we are talking about loading data into cloud or extracting data from cloud application or application sitting in cloud, which is being accessed over internet, if it is a sensitive data that you are dealing with, say for example you are loading data into cloud applications. Say for example you are using HCM data loader file, and say you are loading employees, and the employees file might have some sensitive information, right? So clients, when they send in the file, they might encrypt the file and they might send you the encrypted file. And what encryption methodology is supported in ERP Cloud? PGP encryption is supported. Okay, so what do? So this PGP encryption, whenever you generate PGP keys, there will be two keys that gets generated. There will be a public key that gets generated, and there will be a private key that gets generated. Two keys get generated, private key and a public key. A public key is typically used to encrypt the file. It is used to encrypt the file. And a private key is used to decrypt the file. So earlier we didn't had an option to generate PGP keys from within the application, but now Oracle has given this option as well directly. You don't need to generate PGP keys within the application within ERP Cloud itself. There are quite a few other tools available in the market which can help you to generate PGP keys. But now that we have this option to generate encryption keys right within the application, many clients are using this feature, because you don't even have to share the encryption key explicitly over email or through some other communication medium, right? So you generate certificates and you pass on the passphrase in a secure manner to the client, so that clients can download the encryption keys directly from here, encryption or decryption keys. When I say encryption or decryption keys, public and private key. So what you usually do is you select PGP, you give it a name. You can say FT14 PGP key. Okay, you can give a passphrase. I will use the same passphrase. Okay, and you change the key type. So these three parameters control how your encryption key should be generated, how complex that encryption key should be. So the key type RSA is the latest one. Select the latest one, and the key length, how complex or how long your key should be. You can select the maximum possible one, 2048, and you can also select the recent algorithm, AES 256. So these 3 bits control how complex your PGP, how complex and long your PGP key should be. So once you select the parameters and click on save and close, what will happen? A key gets generated. And this key has two parts to it. So when you export it, you can click on public key. And when you click on public key, it gets downloaded automatically. And you can download the private key as well. And what do you use public key for? So when you generate a key, there will be 2 keys that get generated under public key as well as private key. So we have exported public key now. We have exported public key, and this public key is typically used to encrypt the files. So since it is an encryption key, when you try to export it, it didn't ask you to confirm the passphrase. So you are able to automatically download it, because this is after all used to encrypt the files, not decryption, right? Decryption means, yes, there is a chance that something might get exposed. So that needs an additional layer of security. So when you download the private key, it will ask you to confirm the passphrase. So you enter this passphrase, tab out, and click on save as. You see that the private key is also downloaded now. And how will these keys be used? When client is sending you an employee file, which you need to load using HCM data loader, what do? The client will encrypt that file using this public key. Okay, so they will go ahead and download the private key, download the public key from within the application itself, and they will encrypt it. How do you encrypt it? There are many tools available in the market which will help you to encrypt the files using PGP keys. There is one of the tool that you can also probably try out if you want to explore. This is a PGP tool. If you go ahead and type in a PGP tool, this is a free tool that you can download. It's available for all the operating systems. You can download and install it. And when you install it, after you install it, if you go to your search box, and if you search for a PGP tool, you should be able to find it out. You can see the PGP tool application coming up, and you can use that. You can use this tool. You can load in the keys here into this tool, and you can use it to encrypt the files. So the way it works is, client will use the public key to encrypt the file. They will generate an employee file from the source system. They will encrypt it with this public key, and they will tell you that, boss, I have used FT14 PGP key to encrypt it. And what do? You will kick off the HCM data loader process, and when you are submitting HCM data loader process, it will ask you what decryption key needs to be used. So just to show you, let me just quickly show you the navigation in HCM data loader, or the option where you can pick up that decryption key. So if you go into my client group, I think this user doesn't have access to it. Okay, let me show it to you in our application. So if you go to my client group, go to data exchange. Don't worry, we'll talk about HCM data loader and all this stuff in a greater detail in the other sessions. But I just want to throw some light on the encryption methodology here. So if you look at HCM data loader, when you try to import and load a file, it'll ask you to pick up a file. You can select a file. I'll pick up the file that I have used in the previous session. Then go to HCM data loader. Data migration, go to HCM data loader. Pick up any file. I just want to show you the option where you can pick up a decryption key. Let's say that this is a file. Let's say that this is a file that client has shared with you, and they have shared an encrypted file. They have encrypted the zip file with the help of a with the help of this public key, and they have told you the key name. And what do you do when you're loading in that file? You will select the file and load it in, and you will say that if you don't select a decryption key, the HCM data loader will fail. It says that, boss, you've given me an encrypted file which I can't read. So for encrypted file to be loaded, you have to select the PGP signed option. And if you click on this dropdown, you will be able to see the keys that are configured in the instance. So in this particular instance, in the security console, there are these many keys generated. Okay. Similarly, if you go into the data exchange in this particular option, you will be able to see FT14 PGP key, and you can directly select that option. Say, for example, think of this as FT14 PGP key. You just select the key here, and what HCM data loader will do, it will use this private key to decode that file, to decrypt that file, and then it will load it in. So this is inbound mechanism. Inbound means you get an encrypted file, you select a decrypt, you select a key that needs to be used to decrypt the file, right? And in many cases, you have out of the box option where you can pick up a decryption key while you're loading the file itself. But in some cases, you might be sending out a feed from cloud application. Say, for example, you are generating a payment file and you are pushing it to SFTP location. In such cases, what do you need to do? You are generating a file, right? So in such cases, what do? You will use a public key to encrypt the file, and you will pass on the private key, or you will let the client know what key you have used to encrypt the file, so that they can use a private key of that particular key and decrypt it. Okay, and the way these keys work is, so you have these keys downloaded, right? So if you have these keys here, what do? You have to first load those keys in. So you import the key, can go back into downloads, and you can load in the public key. Or load in the private key, that will also have a public key in there automatically. So when you load it in, a key got loaded. And if you want to encrypt a file, so you select a file. Say, for example, you want to encrypt this. Let's create a new text file. ABC. Encryption test.txt. Okay, so you let's think of this file as a zip file that you want to encrypt. What do? You have that file and you want to encrypt it. So you go in there, you select the file, all files, and you see this encryption test.txt. Select the file, and you can select what key you want to use to encrypt it. I want to use FT14 PGP key, and I want to save it to the same folder. So if you don't want to save it to the same folder, you can select the folder where you want to save it, and you can put an extension of .txt. And we usually put in an extension of .pgp at the end to indicate that it's an encrypted file, and save it. And you can click on encrypt it, and if you want, you can delete the source file as well, and you can encrypt it. And you see that file is encrypted successfully. And if you look at this file, so we have left the source file as well, that's why it's still lying around. And if you look at this file, if you try to open it, what do you see in there? You don't see any content in there. So it's an encrypted file. So clients, after they prepare a data file, they encrypt it using a public key, the way that I've just shown you. And they tell us the key that I need to use to decrypt this file. And what do? I go ahead and select the decryption key in HCM data loader or other options. And in this case, if I want to decrypt this, I'll use the same tool to show you how you can decrypt it or how the decryption works. So if you select a decrypt a file option, go to desktop, and you select the file that you want to decrypt, click on choose, and you see that it automatically selects it automatically selects the key with which this file was encrypted, and it is asking you to enter the password. What is this password? When you generated the PGP key in the application, there was a passphrase that you entered, right? And what is the passphrase that we entered? It is FT14 PGP key. So you enter that passphrase here and you click on OK. And what happens? A file is getting generated now. It is getting decrypted, and let's say I put 1 at the end. Okay, because we already have encryption test file in the same location. And click on decrypt. And when you decrypt it, you will see a file getting generated, decrypted, and you will be able to see the content of it. Okay, since we are talking about application in the cloud and exchanging files with the cloud applications or ERP cloud application or HCM cloud, it supports PGP encryption out of the box, and it is extensively used both for inbound and outbound integrations. So I'll show you how to use this encryption key or how to use this option in terms of outbound integration. I'll show you when we generate a disbursement payment file. I'll show you how you can encrypt a file and place it in SFTP as an out-of-the-box option. And yeah, this is how the PGP encryption works. It has 2 keys. Public is usually used to encrypt the file. Private is used to decrypt the files. Any questions, guys? Any questions on the PGP encryption or the way you generate the certificates? Okay, I hope you guys understood this, but that's okay. If you don't get all of what I explained as far as the encryption is concerned, that's okay. I'll be repeating it when we are doing the disbursement payment file format session. So nothing to worry.
Prasad, sorry, I have one question.
Yes.
When you are uploading the SDL file, it is giving encryption type 2 option, right? PGP signed and PGP unsigned. Okay,
Correct.
so what is the difference? Signed mean it is a self-signed or it is signed by CA authority?
I think it's a self-signed.
Okay.
I'm not particularly sure, but I believe it's a self-signed application. Yeah.
Okay. But while we are creating this key, we are not mentioning it as whether it is a signed one or by
key.
default it is a self-signed only, right?
Correct. By default, it will be a self-signed one that gets generated, and you have to select PGP signed usually.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Prasad.
Thank you. Yeah. Let me share the notes with everyone. I'm not able to see an option to add an attachment here. Just give me a minute, guys. Everyone in the meeting. Yeah, I see an option now. And yeah, let me share the text pad or the notes that I have entered or the file that I have prepared in the session. And yes, the PPTs will be shared by the client, by the admin. So you can wait till end of day today. I'll also intimate admin to send across the code back to all those who have already enrolled. And in case you have not enrolled yet, please do enroll today. And Sela, when you, I'm not sure when you face this issue, but yeah, so did you see that problem all through the session that you were not able to follow when I was clicking on different screens? Does anyone else also have the same problem that Sela mentioned in the chat? That when I click on pages, is it taking time for you guys to see what exactly am I navigating to?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Yeah, but probably I'll try to keep it slow, Sela. Yeah, probably it could be something to do with the network speed or the internet connection that you have at your end. It could probably be that, but I'll when I'm navigating between the screens, I'll try to be a little slow. I'll take that into account. Okay. Anything else, guys? Anything else? Any questions as far as security is concerned?
Prasad, I just have one suggestion. Like, I have one request. Yes. When you're taking examples, can you consider some HCM concepts too?
Yeah, sure. For only for security, I don't get into it because Ravi will explain that in the functional sessions. But when I'll take your feedback into account. And especially if as we progress along the course, you will hear other people complaining, saying that can we also talk about other examples, because there will be a lot of HCM components, specific components involved in there. Like you have HCM data loader, HCM extracts, and other components there, or fast formulas. So everything you need to know as a HCM consultant, yes, we'll be covering them as well. But like you said, yes, when I take out examples, I will include HCM, one from HCM as well, so that it will be easy for you to relate to.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll meet again tomorrow then. Thank you. And please do watch out. You might get an email with a new meeting ID. So in case you already enrolled, you will get a new meeting ID, which you need to use to join tomorrow's session. Thanks, everyone.